my father replaced me with my brother while toasting champagne. 3 days later, I legally removed them both without saying a word. They thought they were announcing a successor. I was watching them announce a target. It happened on a Friday night. Black ties, golden lighting string quartet in the corner, the kind of party you only throw when you believe the empire is safe. The company was celebrating 15 years. I'd built 12 of them. I wasn't scheduled to speak. I wasn't invited to the stage. But I knew how this would play out. I'd written the script 100 times in my head. It always ended with a polite nod from my father, a public thanks, and a private reminder to keep things running smoothly behind the scenes. But this time, he added something new. Starting next quarter, my father said into the mic, my son Alex will be transitioning into the role of CEO. The room clapped. And just like that, I was written out of my own history. Alex stood beside him, smiling with that easy, hollow charisma he always wore when cameras were around. My father rested a hand on his shoulder, proud, possessive, like passing down a sword to a warrior who never trained. No one looked at me. That's the thing about being invisible. They forget you're watching. So I did what they expected. I smiled. I toasted. I played the role of gracious operator. But inside, I was reviewing timestamps, because the move they made was public. But the move I'd been planning, that one was private. I had anticipated this moment, not this exact dinner, not these exact words, but the betrayal. I saw that coming years ago. That's why I kept records. That's why I invested my own capital when the company faltered. That's why every time my father said it's just temporary, I smiled and asked for it in writing. People think power is loud, that it announces itself with corner offices and raised voices. But real power, the kind that ends empires, it moves like smoke. Unseen, until you can't breathe. After the applause faded, Alex came to me with his glass raised. I know it's a big shift, he said, but we'll make a great team. I let the glass meet his. To the future, I replied. What I didn't say? You're stepping into a role you've never earned in a building I wired for detonation. I left the party early. No one noticed. That's the advantage of being written out. You control your own exit. By the time I got home, the heels were off, the dress was forgotten. I sat at my desk, opened my private archive, and typed in the phrase I hadn't used since 2018, failsafe. One file stood out. Executive Rights, Amendment Clause 9B. Signed by James Harper, my father. Effective immediately upon issuance. The document was legal, binding, unrevoked, and it said any transfer of CEO authority requires a majority shareholder vote. I sat back in my chair, no longer invisible. I was dangerous now. People like to say my father built the company. That's not wrong. He laid the foundation. But I poured every inch of concrete that kept it standing. He started with a warehouse and a phone line. I turned it into an $80 million machine that could move product across 5 states overnight without a single manager picking up the phone. He had the vision. I handled the execution. When I joined the company, no one cared. I wasn't hired, I inserted myself. There was no onboarding, no welcome packet, no salary. Just a desk in the corner of dispatch, and a quiet understanding that I was just here to learn. They assumed I'd disappear once I got married, or bored, whichever came first. So I learned in silence. I mapped inefficiencies. I memorized supplier behavior patterns. I noticed who panicked when numbers dipped, and who made them dip on purpose. At first, I kept my name off everything. No fingerprints, no credit. That was the deal. They'd listen as long as I didn't ask to be seen. So I said yes to every small project. Fixed routing delays in Idaho. Solved a fleet insurance crisis. Restructured our payment terms with the union vendors. Each time I did, my father called it lucky timing. I didn't correct him. I documented it. By year 2, I was running operations. Officially, I was just a senior analyst. Unofficially, nothing moved unless I said so. When things went wrong, I was the first call. When things went right, someone else got the podium. Fine by me. I wasn't building reputation. I was building leverage. When the 2017 expansion stalled, I offered a solution. $500,000 from my own investments. Dad said, "You sure about this?" "It's not like I can give you a thank you parade." I said, "I want paper, not applause." That got his attention. I took 10% equity instead. Same thing happened again in 2019 during a legal dispute. He needed liquidity. I offered it, got another 8%. No drama, no begging, just signatures. By 2020, I held 35% of the company. Quietly, no public announcement, no board celebration, just clean filings and timestamps. Because I knew someday this would matter more than any press quote. Alex never saw it. Even when he walked into the building shaking hands like he already owned the place. He thought I was just operations, a detail. A cog. That's how I liked it. Because while he toured departments for photo ops, I rewrote 3 vendor contracts to include personal liability clauses if breached. Not because I needed them, but because it reminded me what real power looked like. People see the titles, CEO, COO, director. What they don't see is who has final sign-off, who controls the hiring pipeline, who manages the kill switches on the internal systems. Me. They thought I was behind the scenes. But the truth is, I designed the scene. There was one night 2 years ago when I almost walked away. I'd pulled 62 hours in 5 days. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. My skin was breaking out. I forgot my own assistant's birthday. I sat in my office, lights off, eyes on the city, thinking, why am I doing this? That night I added 1 line to my private ledger. If I ever get erased, I activate. It wasn't bitterness, it was protocol. I didn't want their spotlight. I didn't need their approval. What I needed and what I quietly built was control. The kind they wouldn't notice until it was too late. And now it's too late. Alex had never worked a full week in his life, but he knew how to work a room. He arrived at the company one Monday morning with a fresh haircut, a designer bag, and a charming just here to observe smile. The kind of smile that's been used to steal kingdoms since before kingdoms had HR departments. He shook hands, made jokes, complimented the receptionist's earrings like he'd been trained for it. He had. By life. By entitlement. I watched him pose for pictures with warehouse workers. I watched him pretend to take notes in logistics meetings he didn't understand. I watched him win over interns with almond milk lattes and recycled startup quotes. And I said nothing. Because he wasn't a threat. Not yet. The first real sign came when I saw his name copied into an internal operations thread. One I hadn't authorized. One he had no reason to be in. The second, when he showed up to a strategy meeting I'd been running solo for years and sat in my seat. No apology, no explanation, just, oh, I thought we were co-leading now. I didn't correct him. I just noted the date. He pitched recycled ideas. Most of them were mine, just stripped of context and laced with buzzwords. He had no idea what the contracts actually said, but he knew which sentences sounded impressive when you said them confidently. My father nodded through every one of them. This is the energy we need, he said once. I almost laughed. Alex had energy the way fireworks have strategy. Still, I let him talk. I let him think he was earning ground. I let him give input, assign tasks, schedule meetings. I even let him revise one of my vendor proposals, then watched him nearly breach 3 compliance clauses. I fixed it before legal noticed. He never found out. And neither did my father. Because I needed them to believe I was too tired to fight, too loyal to push back, too broken to plan. They weren't wrong about the exhaustion, but they were wrong about the silence. One night I found a new clause buried in our internal documents, Interim Succession Protocol, Addendum B, stating that in the event of my inability to perform duties, interim executive control would shift to Alex. No vote, no board approval, no cause required. I traced the document's revision history. It had been updated by our in-house counsel, someone my father had played golf with for over a decade. No surprise. I didn't react. Instead, I filed it, in my own system, alongside a full timeline of unauthorized access, internal overreach, and contract irregularities tied to Alex's credentials. The paper trail was messy, and it all pointed to one truth. They weren't waiting for me to step down. They were preparing to push me. At a fundraising dinner a week later, my father casually introduced Alex as the next generation of Harper leadership. Not officially, not publicly, just enough for the right ears to hear it. I lifted my glass and smiled. Let them think I was watching my own replacement, what I was actually doing. Counting how many board members nodded, 5. Not enough to push me, but enough to start a campaign. That night, Alex pulled me aside by the valet line. Hey, he said, still half drunk on praise. I know this is awkward, but you'll still have a huge role. Honestly, you've done the heavy lifting. Now it's about vision, you know? I looked him in the eye. Calm. You're right, I said. It's your time. He grinned like a boy handed the keys to a sports car. And I smiled too because I had already installed the kill switch. What Alex never understood is that leadership isn't given. It's architected. And while he was busy planning his photo shoot for the company's homepage, I was planning something else. Paper, timestamps, power of attorney filings, voting rights agreements. He thought I was checking out, but I was counting down. There's a specific kind of quiet that only exists in offices right before a storm. At 8:45 a.m., I walked through the front doors of Harper Freight like I had every day for 12 years. Same lobby, same marble floor, same staff pretending not to glance at me too long. They'd heard. Of course they had. By now the succession dinner had made the rounds. The whispers had started. She took it well. Is she stepping down? I heard her brothers already picking out paint colors for the CEO suite. I said nothing. I didn't need to. I wasn't there to clear rumors. I was there to clear the board. Inside my office, I powered up my laptop. 2 monitors, 1 document. The file I had labeled 3 years ago with just 2 words, fail-safe protocol. I'd reviewed it a dozen times in the last 72 hours. Every signature, every timestamp, every clause. I didn't need to reread it now, but I opened it anyway, out of respect, for what was about to happen. At exactly 9:00 a.m., a knock on the door. 3 sharp raps. Punctual. Predictable. I didn't answer. They walked in anyway. Alex first, grinning like he was already on the cover of Forbes. My father behind him, confident, collected, already assuming the next 30 minutes would go his way. He took the seat across from me, like a king returning to a throne. I assume you're aware of today's transition, he said. I didn't flinch. Transition. Interesting choice of word. Alex laughed lightly. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Harder for who? My father leaned forward. Alex will be stepping in as CEO. We'll need you to help him get familiar with day-to-day operations. A full handover by month's end. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Like I hadn't outlasted every fire this company had faced. Like I was a temp lucky to have lasted this long. I tilted my head, slowly. Dad, I said, I think you're mistaken. He frowned. Lisa, this isn't up for debate. I smiled. Oh, I know. Then I picked up the remote and turned on the monitor behind me. 1 document, 1 signature. 1 clause, highlighted in yellow. Executive Rights Amendment Clause 9B. Drafted in 2018. Signed by all majority stakeholders. Still active. The screen glowed with legal language. Boring to most. Terrifying to the right people. Alex squinted at the screen. What is this? Your inheritance, I said. Being reassessed, I stood. This clause outlines that any executive transition, including appointment of a new CEO, must be approved by majority shareholders. I paused just long enough for them to understand. You no longer qualify as a majority. My father sat up straighter. That's impossible, is it? I walked to the side of the table and dropped a folder in front of him. 2017, you needed capital for the Nevada expansion. I invested. 15% equity signed and sealed. 2019, the legal dispute with the labor union. Another 8% in exchange for covering litigation risk. And the 35% I already held from silent acquisition over the past decade. That puts me at 58%. Silence. Sharp. Dense. Alex looked at the folder like it was radioactive. Dad. Tell me this isn't real. But Dad said nothing, because even he knew once the documents hit the board it wouldn't matter what he said. Only what he signed. I turned back to the screen. You wanted a transition, fine. But it won't be to him. Not without my approval, not without a vote, and not without consequences. Alex stood. You're bluffing. I didn't blink. Try me. He looked to Dad again, but this time the silence between them wasn't strategy. It was disbelief, disappointment, defeat. Because the truth was brutal and simple. They forgot to read the fine print. I never did. They didn't scream when they lost the room. They regrouped. Not in public, not in emails. They knew better than that. But I saw the signs, the shifting glances, the board members who suddenly had other meetings, The staffers who used to smile now, whispering behind coffee cups. I wasn't being removed. I was being uninvited. Alex didn't storm out after the confrontation in my office. He posed. He played nice. He waited for cameras. But the next day he was already working the phones, calling former investors board, allies' extended family with voting rights. He was telling them his version of the story, that I had ambushed him, that I had weaponized legalese to seize the company, that he was the victim, the son robbed of his birthright by a power-hungry sister. I didn't need to guess. He left fingerprints everywhere. Within 48 hours, I was getting emails from media contacts, requests for comment, anonymous tips, unnamed sources saying the leadership shift at Harbor Freight may have been more hostile than previously reported. Classic tactic. They couldn't beat me in a boardroom, so now they'd try to kill me in the press. But here's what they forgot. I built this company during a recession, during a global shipping crisis, during 5 federal compliance audits. You think a press cycle scares me? Please? Still, I didn't speak. No official statement, no rebuttal. Because power doesn't chase headlines, it plants them, and mine was already drafted. 2 years ago, I'd quietly commissioned a private audit, one that looked at Harbor Freight's financial history under my father's leadership specifically. The years before I took control of operations. The findings weren't illegal, but they were inconvenient. Duplicate vendor payouts, misreported assets, loans routed through offshore entities that never showed on our public filings. Things I had spent the better part of a decade fixing in silence because fixing was faster than fighting. But now I needed the fight, so I made a call. Not to a lawyer, not to PR, to a journalist. One I'd worked with before. Someone who didn't owe my father anything. I'm not giving you a quote, I said. I'm giving you a file. Then I sent it. Every page, every record, every unedited trail of the cleanup I'd done to keep the company alive. I didn't have to add a narrative. The facts would do that for me. The story dropped 24 hours later. Behind the freight, how one woman quietly saved a company from its founder's past. It wasn't subtle. It didn't need to be. Within hours, investor calls flipped from what's going on to thank you for protecting the company. Board members who had ghosted me started replying again. Staffers stopped whispering. Because now they remembered something important. I wasn't just the woman who took control, I was the reason there was anything left to control. Alex, of course, was furious. He called the story biased, incomplete, an attack. He posted a vague Instagram caption about false narratives and family betrayal. And still, he didn't deny a single fact. Because he couldn't. Because the audit was real. Because I'd made sure it was bulletproof. My father. He didn't call. He didn't need to. I knew he was watching. Because for the first time in decades, the company's name wasn't next to his face. It was next to mine. This wasn't revenge. This was realignment. They had tried to cut me out of the picture, so I made them realize I was the picture. Everything else, just background. He asked to meet in person. No lawyers, no advisors, just us. It was a Thursday, the same day of the week he used to take me to school as a kid. Coffee in hand, Bluetooth headset in ear, never really listening. Now we sat across from each other at the same conference table, where he once told a room full of executives that I was sharp for a girl. This time he didn't say anything for the first full minute. He just looked at me, like I was a stranger. Maybe I always had been. I underestimated you, he said finally. It wasn't a compliment. It was an autopsy. I nodded. I know. He leaned back. You didn't have to go that far. I met his eyes. I didn't. You did. There was silence. Not uncomfortable clinical. He was calculating, measuring how much damage had been done and how much of it could be reversed. I built this company, he said. You founded it, I corrected. I made it survive. He didn't argue. He knew the audit wasn't fake. He knew the numbers were real. He just didn't think I'd use them. That was his mistake. Alex is out, he said. I know. He won't be back. I made sure of it. Another silence, this one longer. Then, is this what you wanted? I almost laughed, like this was about want. No. This was about inevitability. About math. About clauses. About knowing which fires to let burn and which ones to watch turn to ash. But instead I answered simply, it's what had to happen. He exhaled slow, tired, not defeated, just, finally, honest. I thought you'd always be part of the infrastructure, he said. The engine, the backbone, not the face. Not. That told me everything. He never saw me as a leader, just a system that worked. And when that system demanded recognition, he tried to replace it. I wasn't the engine, I said. I was the architect. Another beat of silence. Then he nodded once. Resigned? I'm retiring, officially. I didn't thank him. He wasn't doing me a favor. He was leaving before the building bore his name without his relevance. I'll sell down most of my shares, he added. I'll keep a small stake, but I won't interfere. I tilted my head. That would be wise. He gave a tight smile, not approval, not affection, just a final handshake without the hands. We stood at the same time, out of habit, not synchronicity. He reached for his coat, then paused. You're not angry, he said. Are you? I looked at him. Anger is noisy. I walked out first. Because forgiveness isn't power, silence is. And I had all of it now. The first thing I changed was the locks, not symbolic, practical. There were too many keys floating around, too many people with access to doors they no longer had business walking through. Security handed me the new master set without comment. Smart. The second thing I changed was the org chart. Anyone who had sat silently while Alex attempted his little coup gone. Anyone who hesitated to back me when I needed them most. Reassigned to departments where silence wasn't an asset. And those who had stayed, those who watched me walk through the fire without flinching, they got promoted. Not because they were loyal, because they were observant. I restructured the board, reduced noise, increased leverage. 3 seats vacated, 2 eliminated. I consolidated authority into a committee I trusted, 2 women, 1 operator, 1 legal counsel. All of them earned their place. None of them were family. I didn't put out a memo, no company-wide speech, no vision statement in the cafeteria. I just made changes and let the results speak. 6 months later, Harper Freight looked nothing like the company my father once ran. We cut 5 underperforming contracts, secured 3 new national partnerships, adopted real-time AI logistics, monitoring the kind of system my father once called unnecessary fluff. Revenue jumped 24%. Staff turnover dropped in half. Customer satisfaction, highest in company history. No PR stunt. No press tour. Just numbers. Clean. Unarguable. Some people called me ruthless. I corrected them. I was efficient. There was a moment, a quiet one, on a Wednesday afternoon. I was walking past the break room. 2 interns were arguing over a data model. One of them looked up and froze, then whispered to the other, "That's her, the one who owns the company now." They didn't say it with fear. They said it with awe. I kept walking, didn't stop, didn't smile, because it wasn't about being liked. It was about being undeniable. People ask me now if I miss the old days, the chaos, the fight, the proving. I don't. Fighting for your place is exhausting. Owning it. That's quiet. That's calm. That's control. My office now has floor-to-ceiling glass. Not for transparency, for perspective. I like to see the empire I built. And more importantly, I like knowing they see me. Not as the operator, not as the daughter, not even as the CEO, as the reason any of it still exists. It didn't end with applause. It ended with quiet. No grand speech, no victory party, no slow-motion applause from people who once doubted me. Just the sound of my office door clicking shut behind me. And peace. Not because they gave it to me, because I took it. A year had passed since the war, since the documents, since the press. Alex had disappeared from the industry, a LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated. Rumors of a failed startup in Miami. I didn't check. He was no longer relevant to the story. He never was. My father and I hadn't spoken since the day he stepped down. Until last month. He invited me to dinner. Neutral ground, no agenda, no promises. He looked smaller, not in stature, in certainty. The weight of being wrong tends to shrink a man. I read about the last deal, he said over his drink. That was a smart move. I nodded. I know. There was a ghost of a smile. Half regret, half recognition. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. He lifted his glass. To Harper Freight, he said. This time, when I clinked my glass against his, it wasn't for closure. It wasn't even forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. And that was enough. Now I run this company my way. No one questions who's in charge. No one needs to ask permission. Because I don't manage by fear. I manage by memory. They remember what I did to keep it alive. They remember what happened to those who tried to take it. And more importantly, they remember I didn't raise my voice. I raised the stakes. My team. They move faster now. Think sharper. There's clarity in working for someone who doesn't tolerate confusion. There's power in knowing that the person signing your checks has bled for every zero on them. I get asked sometimes, mostly by other women, how did you do it? How did you win? I never say revenge. I never say legacy. I say structure, documentation, patience. And when they ask if it was worth it, I tell them this. Look around. No one's questioning if I belong anymore. That's what worth looks like. They thought I would burn out, break down, walk away. Instead, I built something too strong for them to burn, too solid to break, too big to walk away from. And when the dust settled, I didn't just survive. I became the standard. So no, I don't want to thank you. I want silence. The kind that follows a war that no one dares restart. The kind you earn not because they lost, but because they know next time they wouldn't survive me twice.